get on to the good stuff.
Yeah.
So just real quick, thanks everybody for joining us today. Just to set some context, this is basically a release stream. We're going to be talking about all things KendoReact. So we have Carl and Stefan here on the line. And really, this is just open floor, your turn, your time to just ask any questions you have, anything you want to talk about. If you don't ask any questions, so I'm going to bring up my screen here, and we're going to go through some of the demos, some of the components, but Carl has also offered that if no one has any questions, he's just going to talk about GameStop for 90 minutes straight. He made that offer, so.
Yeah, it can easily happen, so.
So while we're doing that, I'm just going to get up my screen. We get a little bit of the matrix here for a second. But if you missed our webinar yesterday, we went through some of the new components, some of the new features that are a part of this KendoReact release. And here they are, just quickly, high level. You've got 7 or 8 new components here. We've got a number of new features as well. So what I thought we'd do is basically just go through each of these components, just basically one at a time. We could look through their documentation. I've got a sample app over here, so we can do some playing. So if there's certain options that you want to see, if you want me to break something. I think last time we did this, we tried to put a Gantt chart in just about everything. So we could do that as well if that's what people want to do.
We were actually oddly successful with that. And that is not part of our testing, by the way. We don't say, all right, let's see with this custom renderer, if we shove a Gantt chart in there, what happens, right? So if anything, made me even more proud of the components that they could handle that situation.
There are some things too. They're like, there's like, we could maybe try to put a Gantt in a fab button. I don't know. There's some interesting like custom rendering options we have that we could explore. So I'm just checking the chat. Eva says we need to think of a new name for Acme Industries. Yeah, if anybody has, I don't know. I like Acme. Acme is very near and dear to me. I'm actually trying to remember. Acme I've been using as a sample app for probably 5 or 6 years now. So there are lots of native script Acme apps. And I actually don't remember where that name originally came from. But now, like everything I build, it's always Acme.
Well, I mean, I always think about it from a Looney Tunes perspective, right? Like the Acme everything, and especially the Roadrunner. So every time we go through this, you have your fake data that you're generating, right? With some libraries that help out with generating data, so it's not just the same like Northwind data, right? But I'm always just thinking about that poor coyote and anvils getting dropped, and fake tunnels being painted and all that stuff.
Yeah. Maybe I'll have to bring in like some of these sort of images, right?
Yeah, exactly. Maybe you start selling anvils and rockets and all this other stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Salt and burn. Yeah. Meep, meep. Exactly. You just bring in Roadrunner throughout this.
Yeah. I'm not advertising the service, by the way, but I believe it is Disney Plus that has it. Is it Disney Plus or is it HBO? One of them. Sorry that I get confused with all these streaming services. There are too many, but what are you going to do? One of them has Looney Tunes, like it's not the entire collection, not like episode 1 all the way to the last episode, but they have a lot of the heavy hitters in there. So I've been enjoying watching that once in a while.
Stefan, I'm curious, are you like, is Looney Tunes a thing? Is it well known in Bulgaria at all?
Oh yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
Okay.
I have watched it like a lot. And I always felt bad for the coyote. So, yeah. I'm one of those guys that felt bad for the coyote, for Tom, and yeah.
Yeah, Tom, I'm with you. Jerry's a bit of a jerk. I'll be honest. Like, Cat's just minding his own business, and Jerry's getting, he's really trying to get him. So,
all right. Well, maybe we can do. I don't know. What do we? So I think what we'll do is we'll just start going through these, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to watch the chat. So if you have any questions, like there's no set order to this. So if you want to jump around to some other components or some other things, just drop in questions or things in the chat, and we can do them. And so I'll be kind of keeping an eye on that. But if not, we'll basically just go one component at a time here and just start playing around. And so we just start right at the top with the tile layout. And this one, actually, I really like this component. I think we need to update this example because I know when I first looked at this, I reached out to Carl and I was like, this is cool, but I don't know what I would necessarily use this for until Carl like gave me like an aha moment. He's like, oh, like dashboards or widgets or that sort of thing. And it clicked for me right away, like, oh, yeah, of course. Because I think that's a super common thing that people build, especially like enterprise company environment sort of thing.
Yeah, no, it's on the list of things for us to improve with the documentation for sure, just to get a little bit more fleshed out sample to get some sparks going. I think, yeah, if you look at, I believe the Angular one has a good example as well, and that's similar to what we did in the jQuery demos as well, with just some fake KPIs. I know that's everybody's favorite thing, more acronyms that we have to deal with in the industry, but that often resonates with people. Anything that has like percentages, data, charts, graphs, whatever it might be. Stonks going up, right? That's all we care about. So
Yeah, we should just steal this like verbatim and just use it because I like this. This one's a little bit easier for me to understand. Like, oh, I see what's going on.
Yeah,
I do like that this is based directly off CSS Grid, and so there's some cool things about that. And like one of them, so this is a tile layout, so I can do this sort of thing. And one thing you can do is, because this is CSS Grid, is you can just debug it using grid stuff. So actually, I should make this bigger so people can see. But if you're not aware, there's actually a really, really nice grid debugger in Firefox. And so actually, you can do things like select the grid, and Firefox will show you like this grid is kind of big. So it's kind of hard to see exactly, but it gives you this nice little UI for poking around the grid. You can display like numbers and like
wow.
If you do names, so part of the grid spec is you can give areas of the grid's names. So there's a way of showing that. There's a lot of cool stuff in here.
That shows that all I do when I work with CSS Grid is just refresh the page and hope that I fixed whatever I just broke, right? I actually, why didn't I go in and check if there's any sort of developer tooling specifically for CSS Grid? I mean, of course there is. That's really neat.
And let's bring up, I'm just going to take these tiles because I want something that's a little bit more than just a static set of tiles. So let's just say I've got people in here. Just bring over the demo directly. Because I didn't play much with some of these other options that you can do, because I think you can, yeah, like resize this. I know one issue I had when I started playing with this, and I meant to ask the team about this too, but I keep accidentally selecting text. You can kind of see that as I do this, and I don't know if that's something that I'm doing wrong, but you can see like some orange pops up sometimes as I'm dragging these things around. Might be a CSS thing too, because there's a way of configuring so text can't be selected, sort of thing.
Yeah, I wonder what's going on there. It'd be interesting to see if we had more than just text too, if it does a similar thing. Could be something to make note of that we can look into to see if what specifically the cause is there.
Oh, and
I think what's happening is pretty much like the browser wondering if you're trying to select the text or you want to drag the element. Sometimes it can fire both events because they are triggered pretty much from the same action, and it may get confused for like a millisecond.
yeah, isn't there a like text selection? That's not what I wanted to do. There we go. I was failing a keyboard shortcut there for a second, but like I think somebody in chat might know this too. Text selection. Oh, there's some way in CSS that you can prevent text from being selected. And I wonder if like we could put in something that says while a drag is active, just prevent that. CSS disable text selection.
There is user select none, which may be helpful.
Property is non-standard, avoid using it. I love whoever decided to put an emoji in here, like A+.
Yeah, warning.
Yeah, so this is probably not what you're supposed to do, but we're going to do it anyways.
That's what we're here for today.
Exactly. Yeah, so see, it works, but at the same time, it's also not like you probably, I don't know, you might want this in like anything that can be dragged, because you kind of do want like, because if you're going to allow dragging, you like by necessity can't allow the users to select text. So you probably could be smart enough to say, what's the top level component of this? K-tile layout, I'm guessing.
Yeah, but then what if you do want to allow users to select some of the information in the tiles when you're not dragging? Or, how do you, if the browser's, firing both things at the same time, how do you determine which one the user's trying to do over the other?
Well, but like if it's a draggable tile, I don't think there's any way the user could select anything, right? Like, does the tile layout have, is there any concept? Because I know some draggable APIs have like, you have to select a certain part of the card to make it draggable, right? Like you could put like a little icon that says, here's your handle for dragging. Do we expose that at all? Or is it just the whole thing is?
The whole thing, I think it's draggable.
Yeah.
Okay. Which makes sense, because I think considering the whole thing's draggable, like you can't possibly select the text anyways.
You'd be surprised. I guarantee you, the second we somehow disable that, it's going to be the first request that we get is going to be, hey, so my users are trying to copy and paste the text in there. There's always some fun scenarios that we have to solve.
This one too.
Usually you can try like listening to some drag end and drag start events and to just disable it or enable it dynamically. For example, if the user start dragging, you can disable the selection so it doesn't do this flickering, and then once the user stop dragging, you can enable it again. So
yeah, I think that's probably the smarter way of doing it, because then in the future, if we give people drag handles or like, because also you can set some of these tiles. I know there's a way of saying this one you can't mess with. Somewhere in here, I know there's a way. So this is positioning, resizing, reordering. Yeah, so there's a reorderable Boolean. So like, for example, yeah, exactly. You want to make sure that the user can do this in tiles that you can't actually mess with. This one too, I realized there's more to the CSS grid spec than I thought, because I will be honest, I had no idea that there was an auto flow property as part of the spec. And I couldn't for the life of you like remember these just because this is not like, to me at least, this isn't an intuitive set of properties, column dense, row dense, and unset.
Yeah, it's going to be tough on the old noggin to remember all those for sure.
But the thing I like about this and the implementation is that learning these properties, like it's based off the spec, right? So it's not like some custom stuff we made up for the purpose of a Kendo component. It's what the spec does. So you can just use like online tutorials, which I think we linked to one, or we linked to MDN here. So you can use any of that to learn it, and it just works within our controls.
Yeah, I think that's something that I've enjoyed about Kendo UI pretty much since its inception. When we started in jQuery, which I know you're familiar with as well, TJ. But anytime we could lean on a standard, we would, to make sure that all we're doing is potentially augmenting, what you're already using. So I used to talk a lot about how if you're learning Kendo UI and jQuery at that point, right, you're not learning a specific API to Kendo UI. Yes, of course, some of our components, we have our methods, our API calls, etc. But the fundamentals we're going to allow you to learn, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript really, and jQuery at that point across the board. So it was, we continue to do that even on the, React, Angular, and everything. If we can do something in a standard way, we will. And I think this is a prime example of that.
By the way, this is super satisfying. Like, I almost want to, for the next release, build a little game with this, because I think there's just some fun things you can do with this.
Yeah, I have some ideas in my head around how to gamify some of our by that not like achievements and everything, but actual make it a game using some of our components that have been floating around in my head. Just not enough time to actually implement it and play around with it.
Yeah, the next hour is just going to be me just playing with these things and resizing.
Yeah, it is satisfying. And, the ability to resize, move things around and everything, it just makes it so much easier to apply that. Even though, yes, we're using CSS grid under the hood, like all you're doing is really just defining column span and row span for the size initially. And then after that, you're off to the races, right? Then it's up to the user, how they want to modify things, what they want to check, how they want to rearrange things. And you can, of course, extract that state, save it for later and all that good stuff, right? So it's nice you can get this much power out of just using a pretty simple API.
Yeah, I'm actually curious. So in like a production dashboard scenario, presumably you would want to save the user's changes because they're tweaking this. So I imagine, I'm not doing it for this simple example, but I imagine there's some callback that's like the user did something that's going to give me something that I could then store.
Yeah, there is.
Okay.
I think it's on position change or something like this.
On reposition.
Yeah, on reposition. Yeah. So this will give you the new order of the items. So you can save that in the state, in the local storage, in the database, whatever you want. And you can then, when the user reloads the page, you know how everything should be located.
Yeah, so it looks like, yeah, there we go. So here's your thing. You save that off wherever to your server. Potentially, like, I think something like this, you could even get away with maybe just even like local storage, because it's one of those things that like you're kind of, if that data gets lost, it's not the end of the world. And people might want different settings for different like browsers also, like because if you're viewing it on your phone on your account, you might not necessarily want this to pull up.
Yeah, you have many options. Like, for example, in our support system, we have similar options for saving things, and you can just have multiple view saved. So you can have like
that's true
your desktop view, your mobile view, your, let's say, focus view, where you have like just 3 things on the screen and everything else is hidden. So yeah, you can achieve this as well.
Yeah, I kind of like that actually, because I know like Google Analytics has some similar stuff where you can like create views and then save them off, and you could create like your own little dashboard and save them. So, well, cool. Emmanuel Berg, can you track dynamic content inside the tile? Do you mean just like if you wanted to just put something that's interactive within this? Not totally sure what you mean by just dynamic content inside the tile. Because I know you can, if we go back to the version of this that had people. Oh, that's weird. Did I syntax error this? Let me kill this and start it back up. Because you could definitely show data within the tiles. I don't think, because the tile is draggable, I don't think you could put like a form field within a tile. At least I don't think that would work.
You should be able to, I think, write in them. You can try. You can just put a simple input there. And
I think I've got a, yeah, what happens if we put an input? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be wonky if you put a submit button in each one of the tiles, though. I think that.
I mean, it works. So yeah, you can totally do it. I can't see an identifier for what's in the tile, only how the tile is positioned. Oh, I see. Like, yeah, so if you were saving this off, so let's go back to the, where's that reposition event? I think the tile, does each tile have an ID? I killed the on reposition, so let's put that back in. So I wonder, like, yeah, I don't see any ID. So is this order dependent, or like if I gave this an ID, wonder if it would pass that through. Doesn't look like the ID gets passed through. Yeah, that's interesting. I'm not sure. Because if you're saving this to a database, you got to have some way of knowing which tile is which.
Yeah, actually, yeah. So maybe this is something we have to improve.
Yeah.
And it sounds very reasonable.
Yeah, I think like a pass-through ID would be simple enough, unless we're missing something here. But there is an ID here. It might just be that the event, let's see if this event is supposed to value. It does give a target. So you could get it indirectly because it is exposed here. So if you like threw an ID within the actual item here, like if I just said, like if I toss my ID here, there's a way you could derive it, but there might be a simpler way we could expose it through the event, like right in here.
I think maybe there is something with your example, because I just tested it and it did pass the ID. So
I wonder if it's because I'm using this custom thing, and because I'm using the custom. All right, let's kill this and try it without the custom. Might be something I'm doing.
Are you sure that this is because you're passing it to each one? Yeah, that's strange. But I think you should have like the entire information for the item available in the event, like pretty much everything you add. You can add any field, like test field, and it should appear inside the event.
Yeah, there's definitely a way you can accomplish this. Yeah, it's all within here. So I think we can follow up on this too.
Yeah,
there's definitely a way of doing it. It's just whether we can figure it out.
Yeah, exactly. So if it is something that's a little bit trickier for us to figure out, right? I think the first thing we can always do is, of course, document it and make it a little bit easier to discover. But we could also, of course, see if there's anything we can do with the component itself to improve it, maybe expose it, make it a little bit easier for sure.
Yeah,
making notes about what to improve.
Because now I'm thinking probably the best way is like if we have a demo here that's called like creating dashboards where you could do exactly this. You could just save off the configuration and it would reload. And then the demo basically becomes the doc.
Yep.
So excellent question. All right, so we spent a lot of time on tile layout, and I haven't seen any other questions. So why don't we move on to some of the drop downs in here? And let me just clear out some of this. We have the multi-column combo box, which this thing I actually see as being super useful. Like I've definitely written apps before where this would be handy to have, because I feel like it's a common thing where your user needs to pick an option, right? Select boxes are incredibly common, but the choices involves more than just, let me just, like I'm selecting more than just like what country or state I live in. Like I don't need any additional context for what country I live in, but maybe I know the example I used in here was what product do I need? And to select a product, you might need to know, oh crap, when I pick that, what's the model number? Or what are some additional information of this to make sure I'm picking the correct one? So anytime you have one of those situations, this thing is kind of nice to have.
Yeah, this is, so if we look at the life cycle of all Kendo UI components, in the sense of, we've had jQuery since 2009, 2010. I was lying there. But anyways, I forget how old I am, and time's a weird flat circle, so I always forget the start year. But anyways, we've always had drop downs, right? They always have some sort of hidden information behind them, right? Not just the particular value or text that's being displayed, right? It has an underlying value and all that good stuff, right? And people have been able to pull out and grab those additional fields from that. But the multi-column combo box, which is a mouthful to say, but it was introduced kind of later in the jQuery world after we implemented a lot of other components and a lot of other drop downs. But it quickly became a super popular component based on that, right? I think as soon as we implemented it, I just realized how many other applications that I've been using actively have something like this in there. We could kind of do this with templating before, but this just allows us to be hyper focused on providing an API and providing a UX design around, only kind of targeting these kind of data table structures within the dropdown, which makes it pretty useful.
I know one question I had when I was creating this demo is, so by default, it's a multi-column combo box, and the combo means basically it's a drop down and it's just like a text box as well. Is there a way, like if you wanted to make this just a true drop down that has a grid, is there a way you could just like disable the text box entirely and just force the user to interact with this thing to make the selection?
Technically you can, yes. But I'm not sure if you have like a ready to use option for this, like disable input. But you can do it. You can pretty much take the ref of the component, find its input element, and disable it.
Okay.
What is a little bit tricky is if you compare our drop-down list to our combo box, for example, the base element looks a little bit different to indicate that, yes, you can type into this, or no, you can't type into it.
Yes, so, the visual part is different. And also the part here is that you can allow the user to, this input there serves as a filter for some of the columns that you set. For example, you think that the best column to filter this is the first name, let's say, and this input allows you to also filter the grid by that column. I think here is the name, so you can filter by name. Oh no, you should go to the filtering example because I think it's not available by default. But you can use that to actually filter the data inside, so it's also very useful.
Yeah, I like that you just have options, because I could see depending on the situation, you might want different things. The filtering is super nice though.
Yeah, normally when we're doing validation in terms of a new component, what to potentially add in, a lot of times the request was, well, I have a couple 100,000 rows of data that I want users to be able to select from. They might have tons of columns as well, but I want to hide it all within a drop down. What do we do? And at that point, I think making it just a drop down would be sad for the user trying to scroll through all that, right? But it definitely, yes, like the visual might be a little bit deceiving if you disable it. But at the same time, you certainly can set that up if you like to. But yeah, it gives us a chance to also show off the virtualization, brag a little bit about that while we're talking about it.
Yeah, and we've had a few questions come in. So pervidification, I hope I'm pronouncing that correct. The stream will be available online later. So Twitch, basically, as soon as the stream is over at the end of the day today, it'll be available on twitch.tv/codeit live. There's a videos link there, so you can check it out there. And usually we upload these to YouTube as well. Oh yeah, and Nightbot's staring there. That it's going to be up on the Telerik or Kendo UI YouTube channels too, so you'll be able to check it out there as well. And we did have another question come in from Mr. Montag. So specific question about the KendoReact grid component. Is there a reason why it doesn't implement or wrap the selected property or state of it, maybe expose it, as in component example, it's being extended by object.assign?
So I can say here. So the thing is that we just, for demo purposes, we have specific products collection that we use, and we just reuse it for many examples. And instead of just manually going to change the entire collection, we just do object assign to extend that property for the specific demo. But it's not something that is needed in your real life use case. You can have that property just directly there.
I am glad you were here for this, because this question went totally over my head. So I'm actually curious, where do we use object.assign? Is it just in some of the grid demos?
I think in the selection demo, I think on the first or in the second one, we just use object.assign so we can extend the objects. Yeah, right here. Yeah, we just use it because we already have the products collection. This is like a shared resource we have for multiple demos. And for this specific demo, we need the selected field, so we just add it initially. But it's we just do it in the demo because we need it. It's the data that we have, but it's not something that is needed, required, or.
Gotcha. All right. Let me do. Good questions. Yeah. If you have any else, this is really like I said, we have a rough agenda to kind of go through this, but if you have any questions, feel free to get them out there, and we'll try to help you out. And actually, the other dropdown. So we were talking dropdowns. We looked at the multi-column combo box. We should also talk about the dropdown tree, which I could bring up here also. Which I think this thing I most often see in the wild on shopping sites. I was trying to think of, because when I was coming up with the demo for this, I was trying to think of myself, like, where else have I seen one of these things in the wild? And the other one that came up is, because I think this example, I think it's this one, not the filtering, the one that's got like like the file tree is another good one, because I've seen this sort of thing plenty of times as well. But I'm trying to think of other examples where I've seen this in the wild.
Yeah, those are, I think, the two most common scenarios that I would see in, let's say, like a public-facing web application, right? It gets a little bit trickier once you start diving into, like, I have some specific examples coming from some of our customers of implementing this as a part of their internal applications, which, as we all know, sometimes they might not necessarily follow the same UX as we'd be used to on a public-facing website, right? Where they just as a part of this long process, right? One of the selections happens to be within the tree view because there are some, there is some hierarchical data there. Something that I have seen is, let's say, in replacement of an org chart, which can take quite a large amount of space, right? If you have that all written out, if you were trying to assign something to an individual, right, you can maybe get a little bit of a branch of, okay, they're a part of this team that reports into this person, and depending on how deep you want to go with that, I've seen that as well.
Yeah, I remember. Actually, I was thinking about. So I ended up going with location for this demo because it's hierarchical, but I also could totally see maybe the next level of Acme, I'll introduce some org chart for these fictitious people, but that would totally work too, because I could see that being handy. Oh, here's all the employees, but I specifically want to see who works in sales.
Yeah,
I could definitely see that.
Soon enough, you're going to create a custom data set that you can just open source and plug everywhere and have it just be Acme data.
And I see we have Alyssa. Welcome to the React part of this, and a homeless ninja is joining us as well, which A+ username. Any other questions about the drop downs? Really, any drop downs at this point? I don't know if Carl or Stefan, there's anything else that you thought is cool or worth pointing out about these components.
I guess I can give a little trivia fact as we're waiting for people potentially asking questions here. So one of the reasons the multi-column combo box, see, it's if you don't think about it right before you say it, it's tough. It has its name, is that we try to be as descriptive as possible. So when you're looking at a list of components, you can understand what the component is doing. So it's a combo box that has multiple columns in the content. And it just so happens that one of the reasons that we called it multi-column as opposed to the drop-down grid is because we know that officially calling it the drop-down grid means that people are going to expect what we can do in the current KendoReact grid to all be available within a drop-down, which it's going to get wonky, right? Imagine not filtering through the input and instead having column menus that allow you to filter and dynamically hiding or showing columns and having a pager at the bottom. Crazy things like this could start getting exposed. So we're trying to kind of say, there's a difference between having a table-like structure in the dropdown and offering a full-fledged grid in there. So it's that I always joke about the name of the component because writing it out is okay, or as Lance did in the chat, you can just say the MCCB, which is a little bit easier. I don't know if that stands for anything else, so hopefully there's nothing offensive behind that acronym anywhere. But that's just kind of the idea behind the name for the folks that are a little bit intrigued. I know in the past people have asked where the name came from as I struggle saying it in front of them, so it's more of a little trivia fact for everybody.
Yeah, I actually prefer the descriptive names because it's better than just coming up with something fancy sounding, so that when people search, they have no idea what they're looking for. So
yeah, naming things is hard. So if you look at it, right, we have some naming conventions that come from our jQuery suite, right, that we tried to stick to, because ultimately, while yes, we're building something completely from the ground up on the React side of things, same thing with Angular and Vue, we still know that, okay, if a jQuery user of ours is moving from one tool set to the other, they should be able to find the same name of the components. We don't rename the components when they get introduced into a new suite, but then you have, depending on the market, right, or the space you're in, some libraries on the Vue side have called components a certain thing. React has its own kind of small set of names. Some of them overlap, some of them don't. So it's difficult.
Yep. I also like I have mixed feelings about autocomplete dropdown capitalizing the middle letter. which I've grown to be okay with it. But at first, I did not like the C in autocomplete being capital, or the
yeah.
middle D in drop down. But I can live with it.
Yeah, the amount of times when I write out drop down in a non-developer sense, when I'm not talking to folks internally, when I'm talking to my friends and family, the amount of times I write a capital D drop and then capital D down, all one word.
Yeah.
I have to correct myself constantly.
So the next component is the floating action button. This one is more convenient acronym. Like MCCB, I figure people won't know what you're talking about, but I think most people know the name fab button. I think Material might even call it a fab button. I can't remember exactly, but I think it's a pretty recognizable name at this point. I'm pretty sure most people have seen this just because Google has kind of popularized this convention. I think if you say fab button, most people would know what you're talking about. And I like this. Actually, in general, I'm a pretty big fan of what we've been doing with KendoReact lately, and just Kendo UI in general, and adding a lot of these, like, what I consider like basic app building block sort of things. So like, if you just look at this app, this is a KendoReact app bar. We've got a KendoReact drawer. We've got a bottom navigation, which is another one we're going to get into in a minute. And I feel like we're getting to the point where like you can like build just about everything with these just really simple APIs. Because like floating action button, like I've done front end development, I could implement a floating action button. It wouldn't be the most insane thing, but to get it to look right, to get it positioned right, to get it to be accessible, to get the icon to show up, to find the icon that I want to use, like all of these things are things that I prefer to just not have to do. And I just love that it's this simple, that really all you need to do is give this thing an icon. You don't even need this per se, or this, or this. The only reason I have this offset is so it doesn't go under here, because really all you have to do is this, right? Share button, you click it, and then you do whatever the action is you want to take in your app.
Yeah, it is. It's a slick component for sure, and I know that you know, some websites have doubled down on them, and some might have moved into the kind of button that you might see in the demos, right, where it's more text based. It's still in essence a floating action button. It's just not just a simple icon. Like for example, Gmail has done that, right, where it used to be, even in desktop mode, it used to just be a plus sign at the bottom to create a new email. And now it's kind of moved a little bit to using the floating action button in a little bit of a different way. But it's super useful, I think, in a lot of scenarios, especially one of the demos that we have has it attached to a grid, and that can, I think that's specifically on the jQuery side. We might have not done the same demo on the React side, but the idea there, right, is that it's just another way for people to be able to potentially add data items into the grid and make it a little bit more, I guess, pop a little bit more, right, than just having like a add new thing in the toolbar of the component. So and it has super flexible in terms of what it can do, especially once you start going down the speed dial options that you can set up.
Alyssa wants to know, do the KendoReact components have the same adornments Angular has? I assume by adornments you mean like same APIs, features, that sort of thing?
So we actually have a concept on the Angular side called adornments that lean a little bit more into the, you can see that in the text box or input component, as well as the text area that we just introduced, which Alyssa will talk a little bit about later today. Where you can add things before, inside, or after the input element. So, you know, for example, adding like a little search magnifying glass is the word I'm looking for. In the, let's see if it pops up here so we can. Yeah, if you just jump into the demos that way, you should be able to see the adornments link. Yeah.
Oh,
So we have prefix, suffix, and some built-in ones as well that you can add in.
I see. I didn't realize this was a thing. Yeah, I don't think we have this for React yet.
Yeah, it's something that that the Angular team started doing as a part of the research actually that we're doing for how can we expand even more beyond just like styling things, right? And this is a neat concept, I think, for the folks that are looking to do something like, for example, add their own icons into before or after the text box if it's responsible for something more than just inputting text.
Yeah, and speaking of, if I press the right key there. Speaking of styling, I know one thing I like, and this is just sort of throughout, really this release is having these more consistent ways of styling a lot of the things throughout the library. So if I wanted to, I could say theme color. By the way, this is excellent too. Just, I love this. Oop. Sort of the scrolling, but just having that there is also super nice.
Mm-hmm.
But I can say theme color and success, which will make this green. I think I could say size. I think that's a thing. Yeah. You make it big. There might be border. Maybe I'm making that one up. I think I'm making that up because it's yelling at me.
Yeah, it's quite angry at you.
It's very angry. Oh, okay. Shape is the other one. Well, pill is the default? That doesn't look like a pill. It looks like a circle to me. What happens if I say circle?
I think it depends on the content. So if a pill has just an icon in it, right? It doesn't necessarily have to take like a pill shape because the content doesn't have to fill that out. But then if you want to add text in there instead, right? That's when, okay, it'll start filling itself out a little bit more to be pill shaped. And then if you want to try to force that text into a circle, it might get caught maybe with a little bit of clipping.
Okay. Yep. Yeah. You were correct. Yeah. If we go longer, basically it's got to be, that makes sense. You can't make a pill out of something that doesn't have enough content to actually stretch out.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really all that separates a pill from a circle, everybody.
Yeah.
And you do have a circle shaped pills anyway, so.
Yeah. What happens if I have long text and I make this a circle? Yeah, I guess it'll just make it a big circle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It tries.
I don't think, like, I'm no designer, but I don't think you want a fab button that looks like this.
No, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and Lance was trying to help us add longer text to see the pill. We're just not following along. And I know the router, sorry, not router, the bottom navigation is the next item on our list. And I know you can do some of the same things in here as well, because there's like, yeah, so I can also pass theme color. We can make this. Siri's going off in the background.
Yeah, I unplugged my the Google Home I have in the office just in case because sometimes it just decides, I'm sorry, I didn't know what you were asking for, or I am shouting about something and it tries to Google it for me.
Yeah, so you can do, so just back to the theming stuff, like, I don't think I would necessarily recommend this UX, but I just love how easily configurable this sort of stuff is. What else do we have in here? You could make this.
And as you're looking through that, that's something that we're trying to expose as kind of a standard thing across all of our components wherever possible. Because if you think about the themes that we're offering, it's not just, okay, you know, this is a little bit orange or this is more blue by default. We have some flexible ways for you to be able to just define what a success color is across the board. and then literally every component that has any concept of success, whether it's rendering a success kind of color, or like we have here, right, permanently, or if it's another thing where a notification pops up as success or whatever it might be, it can all conform to that one single color, which is nice.
And Lance says the ellipse looks like an old school silver light button. Yeah, I don't think this is this design will not be appearing in our docs and demos. I don't think I'd recommend it. But yeah, bottom navigation is nice. Like this fits into another, like I said, just like to me, like the bucket of just these really nice components that are super common. Like I think, I mean, a ton of apps need this sort of thing, and being able to add it this easily is just really nice. And I find the API like ridiculously simple for this, because basically you're just an array of things that should go in the bottom navigation with like a little code to manage which one's selected, because we do need to know which one to highlight. But I mean, that's basically it, right? I don't even need stuff unless I want to configure it. So super nice.
Yeah, there's built-in responsiveness and everything like that too, which is always good.
I'm not seeing any other questions, so we can go on and talk about the list box, which I will also admit that when I first saw this, I first asked Carl, like, what the heck do you do with a list box? And then as I started to think about it, it's like I actually like, for the list box, I think the one that makes the most sense to me, or where it clicked for why you might need it, is something like this, where you're basically managing items at multiple stages of a process, or you just need to do some sort of grouping in some sense. The list box is really nice for that.
Yeah, and there are ways that we can even expand on top of what the list box, beyond what we introduced with this release, where it can potentially do in the future, where just a single list box can actually be even more powerful. Because if you think about it, right, sometimes folks are just looking for an area that you can scroll through that has a predetermined height and width, and you can just scroll through all those items to select something from that list, or just review that list, right? And so if you start working with, for example, tossing in some templates, right, you have the ability to control what each item looks like. Even a single list can start becoming quite powerful. But yeah, the having multiple list boxes next to each other, I think, is a very common thing that sticks out for people, saying, "Oh yeah, that's right. This is what I've used a list box for," because this interface right here, I mean, that goes back to old desktop applications as well into new modern applications, and you can kind of see that consistently.
Yeah, and the API again for this is pretty simple, because really all you need to do is say what data appears in the list. This is basically constants. What are the properties? Which property are you going to use for name? Or, well, name is going to be, in this case, like the name of the person from the JSON object. Which property are you going to use to track which one's selected? What are you going to do when someone clicks on one of them? So that's just basically going to manage this selected property. And really that's it. And then the actual magic comes from this bit of toolbar code that actually creates this thing that appears in the middle. And actually, what tools does this code try to help me? Because I think there are more tools. Default, the render's no tools. You can go look if there's other ones out there. Let's see, list box. Oh, where's the list of the tool options here? Array of any, boo.
Yeah, I'm going through our docs now to see if where we can, if we have that, or if we need to toss that in.
I can grab them from this demo.
Yeah. I like coming out of these live streams because it allows me to immediately have some ideas for how we can improve our documentation, or even just some additional features we could potentially add.
So what I do like about this component is that this method here, so what happens when you actually click any of these buttons, is basically totally handled for you. So there's this process list box data, and this isn't something I wrote. This is something that comes from the tool, from the list box package itself. And basically you just pass it your data sets and which tool was clicked. So this comes from, you get an event, it says, oh, hey, the user clicked move left or whatever. And you tell this method all of that stuff, and it just comes back with this result object that just has everything you need. So it's kind of nice because it figures out it does the heavy lifting for you. And all you have to do then is just sort of set the result to update your UI. All right, so a couple questions came in. Kramtara, do you need to have all items at start in a list box set? I think no, because I think we could totally start with these empty.
Yeah, we don't necessarily have a built-in interface for adding items in, but if you provide something externally, right, to add either one item at a time or a set of items, you should be able to update the items collection.
So you're not supposed to do this, but when has that stopped us before, right?
I think anytime somebody uses set timeout, that's what is there for nowadays. It's to have people say you shouldn't do this, but for the sake of the demo, let's do it.
Set team 2. It probably wants this in a React that it definitely doesn't want it in that. React that use effect. And normally when you do this, you're supposed to like clean up after yourself, which we're definitely not going to do. Is it TypeScript that doesn't like this? Yeah, TypeScript doesn't like something about this, which is weird. Because didn't it just work when I passed it up there? That is strange. Wait. It starts, well, what if we just say 0? I see, because it doesn't, okay. This is just TypeScript. We can do this. So we're going to start with an empty array, and then after 2 seconds, we'll fill them up, right? Theory that should work. So we have empty boxes, 2 seconds pass. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So you can start empty. You can add them in. We could even make, we could make this fun, right? Set interval. So every 50 seconds or 50 milliseconds, we could like start adding people to team 1. So like, so const person equals, you can have some fun with this. So we'll generate a random person, which by the way, if your app doesn't have a generate random people function, what are you even doing, right?
Yeah, I think most applications have that.
Yeah. So const new team equals, so we got team 1, and then we're going to tack on person. So actually, let's put person at the start. So add them to the start of the list, and set team 1 to the new team. We'll see if we can code this right. So what did I do?
That first entry is going nuts.
I'm not sure exactly how I accomplished that. Yeah, Lance, generate people is now in my NuGet on my common helpers library. By the way, this is, I don't know what the heck I did there, but it's kind of fun. But the thing that actually generates this is one of my favorite libraries for demo purposes is Chance.js, because it just lets you generate all sorts of random stuff. And for demos, that happens to be super useful. So these are the calls that are generating these people: chance.name, chance.profession, chance.email. I don't think you'd ever want to use this sort of thing in a production app, but for demo purposes, it's kind of really nice. And I don't know, maybe it's because it's remembering the previous stuff. So I'm doing something wrong in that it's just, instead of appending a person, it's totally just creating, like, I think something's wrong with this syntax. Yeah, that's making for a cool bug. Does any like JavaScript people know like why I'm losing the full state of the array here? Because I thought,
yeah, because I think what's happening is that you are not making a new instance of the data.
I think I think you're right. I'm just wondering what, because I thought this syntax would do it. Because I thought wouldn't this like clone the existing array 18 dot. That's even more hilarious because like sometimes it looks like it's getting a second one.
I think probably because like updating the state is asynchronous operation. So, and you're doing it, I think, too fast. So,
okay.
Like, I think you're, because let's see. No, it's still doing the same thing.
Yeah, thanks for making a cool bug. Yeah, if we don't get this figured out, it's not a big deal. We can.
Yeah, I think because you like the combination of use effect and set interval, because the use effect is like executed once. So this theme that you are accessing is always the same theme that was empty at the beginning. Yeah. Even though you are updating it every time, because you are in this encapsulated use effect that is executed once, you have access to the same theme, which is an empty array. I think if you just console log this theme before using it, you see that it will be empty every time.
Yeah, so we could take one last try at this and then not to dwell on it. I know we had some questions. Mr. Montag's been asking some grid questions that I want to make sure we get to. But I think, like, what if we use because there's like the set team one, this thing takes, I believe you could do it as like, it gets the like new version in this, or am I totally wrong? I know there's some way to call the setter with the hook based off its initial value. Yeah, so it's something like this. So what if we did new team? Like I said, this will be our last attempt, so we can get to some questions. But I feel like we might be able to figure this out.
I think the thing is that this team will be always the initial one, because use effects has the option to save the state there, because it's just yeah,
I think you're right. And I think it's going to yell at me if I try to just put the set interval in here too. If I just kill the effect, we'll see if this works straight up. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, because it's a function, you can call anything there, and the use effect is telling it to execute it just once, but like it's very, very crazy.
And I think too, this is like growing
exponentially, right?
And you pretty much, I think, very soon you can break the app.
Yeah. Because I think it's not in a effect, every time it's re-rendering this, it's adding another interval. So let's. All right, that was a good experiment. Let's go ahead and kill that before we seize up the stream.
Yeah, it's also a little bit of a fun thing to learn about React, right? If you're ever doing a list box.
I started by saying, like, we're going to do this the lazy way, right? Because if you were doing this the right way, you do it in a use effect, you'd clean up after your interval. You take a little more time to do it properly, but I mean, we're just having fun, right? So yeah. But to answer the original question that we got to in a roundabout way, you definitely can start with empty lists. You can dynamically add to them. you probably wouldn't want to do them in a set interval anyways. You'd probably want to have some UI like add person or add to this list or whatever. And it's definitely something you could totally do.
Yeah, and as the toolbar is allowing you to render anything in it, you can render your own button with a, let's say, a plus icon, and it will add something.
Yep. All right. I want to make sure we get to Mr. Montek's question because he had asked actually he has two. Let's go to this one first. If a follow-up to the grid question of the first part of it. So there's no plan for the grid component itself to include a built-in selected for the items.
Like, I think Carl can say here about the plans, but technically the reasoning behind why we didn't do it, like for example, you have this in jQuery, let's say, or for MVC, where you just say the grid is selectable, and we can make things selectable as you click them. The reason why we're not doing this in React is that in React, they recommend every information about the state of the data to be in the React state. So if we have to do this internally, we will mutate your data state, and there will be difference between the state in the grid and the state in the app, which is not recommended by React. This is why we're doing it this way, to follow the React best practices and recommendation. We can do it, we just prefer to follow their guidance. Otherwise, it's very easy for us to just do the same logic, just internally.
Yeah, and this is part of something that's a little bit tricky, and when we're talking about Kendo UI as a whole, right? As you potentially, if let's say a user comes from the jQuery world, where a lot of these things are built into the component, right? The components themselves handle their own state. Then you move into libraries like Angular or React or Vue, where we're trying to integrate deeply into those frameworks and follow the best practices there, which sometimes then means that if you're looking for a particular property that you're used to in an area where the component manages like all of its own state completely, then it might be a little bit of an initial shock to kind of get, okay, why isn't that available, right? However, what we're also looking to do across all of our components is see, if there is a desire to have something like this, we might even be able to go down a road of, let's say, variation of the grid component, right? That takes care of all this for you internally in the component, and then you don't worry about anything. And so we're kind of gauging that a little bit right now to see what the appetite is within the community. But Stefan's point is a great one. However, what I can say is I think that's something that we can add into the documentation just to kind of have a note there to clarify that for folks, especially for the ones that are looking for that kind of property. And then, we'll see what the future holds in terms of maybe we have a more opinionated, I guess we can call it, instance of the grid you can import when you're just looking to have everything managed by the component itself.
Yeah, and one of our other ideas is that we can extend the data query package and provide similar methods like the ones that we saw in the list box, methods that are coming directly from the component that can do all of this automatic processing of the data and switching the data between this list and that list. So something like this can be added to the grid as well, and for the data query. So you just pass what should be selected, that automatically updates everything, keeps it in the state. So you have like the good things from both worlds. You have what React recommends, and still we give you some automatic stuff, so you don't have to write and go over the data yourself, and it can save you time.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of these methods. Every time I see one of them, it's just nice, because sometimes I think like the nature of what we're doing with some of these more complex components is it's complex, right? There's data, there's lots of logic that's going on with it, but I think abstracting the common things people are going to want to do. Like, you don't have to use this method, right? You could take the tool name from the list box and do your own logic to figure this out. But I think like this handles like the 90% case where most people are going to want to do the same operations based off it. So thumbs up for these convenient methods. I'm happy every time I see one of them because they usually solve my problem pretty good.
It's a good point that Stefan brings up about the data query package, by the way. It's often an unsung hero that you might not necessarily pay attention to because, you're looking, let's say, for a grid component, and you're not necessarily looking for a component called data query, right? Because you don't necessarily, just the name itself doesn't give off exactly everything it can do. But there's a ton of cool functionality that you can get for any data-bound component. To be able to, let's say, massage the data in one format or another and do things like that just out of that one package.
So we've got go ahead, Stefan.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that yes, this is pretty much covering most of the things that the WAF data source from jQuery does, because I remember that a lot of people are just asking for the data source, like, where is my data source? So yeah, data query tries to give you pretty much all of the things that the data source would do automatically for you. It just makes you more visible how it happens.
Yeah, that the data source is sneakily the backbone of all of Kendo UI for jQuery, and I think, it's a super useful
magic box.
tool. Yeah, it really
magic
is.
box.
Yeah, it does everything you need. Do you deal with data? Use the data source. It also allows it allows it to be shared, and you can do all kinds of crazy stuff with just having one data source on a page and 10 components bound to it, and they all kind of affect each other if you want to, and it's nice and convenient. But of course, if you're used to that, the first question is, well, this magic box that I had on the jQuery side, where do I get that in React? So it's we just switched up the name a little bit and called it data query, and we're doing, it's not exactly the same thing, but a lot of the same features and functionality can be found in there.
Yep.
So we've got about 10 minutes left before we turn things over to Salmon, the Xamarin crew here. So I wanted to make sure if there are any other questions in chat, you have a chance to get them in. And while we're waiting for that, I know, Carl, Stefan, is there anything from the list? So we went over the new components, and out of the new features, is there anything that you want to call out or mention or make sure people are aware of?
Yeah, I think there are two things. Kyle, you're just about to say anything, so you can.
Yes, I was just taking a breath, but you go ahead. You go ahead.
Oh, okay. So about the grid, I think there are just two very nice features. First is the keyboard navigation. It's something that people have asked a lot. We have provided some examples, but they're not like great covering everything, and this is just automatically. Yes, currently it can handle the most common cases, and we can improve it in the future. And the good thing about this is that it's a high order logic that can be reused for the trees, for the Gantt, for everything, and we can improve it a lot. So this is something that it just makes the keyboard navigation way easier. And the other thing is this performance optimization that is mentioned, because in the past, for example, if you're changing something, for let's say you're just selecting something and you have to update the state because your row is now selected, the grid will go and re-render everything. This is pretty much what happened in jQuery, in all other pretty much suites. And now React allows you, based on keys in its virtual DOM, to make comparison. So now we have introduced this new key property, which usually you can use your ID for the record. And when you click something and update it, it will update just that row instead of the whole grid. So it makes some operations way faster than before, because you make single modification to that specific DOM element instead of updating everything else. So it's for large data sets or for more complex grid that you have many calculations, it will make huge difference.
Yeah, I've noticed it on some like really large grids, especially if you're dealing with tons and tons of rows and like virtualization and such. There's a big, it's actually noticeable. And I'll point out too for the keyboard stuff. First of all, if you haven't played with this before, it's another one of those that's super satisfying to be able to cruise around the grid. And if you want to actually activate this, there's a new prop, navigatable. So the same prop exists for the tree list and for the Gantt as well. And if you turn that on, you just basically opt into this like almost like keyboard plus plus, more or less, because the grid by default is keyboard accessible, but this just adds some ways of navigating around in a pretty intuitive and fun way.
Yeah, and it also, if you have editing, it goes very nice with in-cell editing as well. The key combinations are made very easy, so you can, for example, press enter, go into editing, and then back.
Okay, we're totally going to do that. we got a few minutes.
Yeah, but you went to the inline editing, so it's.
Oh, so I should. Okay, which one do I want to do?
I think in-cell.
In-cell. Okay.
Yeah.
And let's make sure.
In-cell editing is a very common thing that people were looking for some additional keyboard navigation.
Yeah, in-cell editing with keyboard navigation is a very, very common use case.
Gotcha. So we're gonna put on navigatable, which I think I did. We're gonna hope we did that right.
Yeah, and just as I saw you clicking this install missing dependencies, we just provide a new logic that automatically will go into every dependency and stuff, and you should not see this message anymore when you open any example. So this is something that one of our wizards, Tsetsi, did. So it's it shouldn't pop up anymore.
So am I not? Am I doing something wrong here?
Yeah, actually, yeah. For this example, it's not going to be that straightforward because the example is based on clicking the row.
Okay.
So it needs a little bit more updates, but I think it's a nice thing to like. You just point me to that this will be very nice to be updated with the navigatable property turned on in the example, so you can have all of the good things directly in the demo. So I'm writing this in my task book. I think that's a great idea to update this demo and make it even more just useful for everybody.
Yeah, because it's amazing because I would never think normally to use a keyboard within a grid. Like it just seems like, and I use my keyboard a decent amount to do things like as I browse the web, but I wouldn't think to do so in a grid. But actually, after seeing how seamless this is, it's actually like I could actually see myself being productive because it's kind of like being in Excel. Because in Excel,
yes, that's the main idea, to have this Excel editing type feeling when you can just go with the tab and the arrow keys through the cells very fast, edit everything, save.
Yeah,
it's great for this.
Well, cool. Carl, we got a few minutes left. I know you had a feature that you wanted, so I want to give you a chance to get that in.
That actually was exactly what I wanted to cover, because when I've talked to some other folks about this, right, they said, oh, I thought we already had keyboard navigation in these components. And it really just is that, yes, we've had it, but you had to roll your own because everybody comes up with all these crazy kind of different keyboard shortcuts and navigations, right? And some people even interpret the accessibility guidelines from WCAG a little bit differently, and internally in their company they've decided that they want to do A, B, or C, right? So this is a little bit more opinionated to make it quick and easy to get up and running, so you can cover the most basic use cases. And this is something that you'll continue to see, I think, across some of our components as a whole. Once we have the bare bones or the API for you to roll your own, then we've gathered enough data from our support tickets and interactions with customers and then we add in some opinionated options on top of it that are, of course, not enabled by default, but just exposed through a property or two, and makes it nice and easy. But yeah, the grid, tree list, and editor all got this improved, let's say, keyboard navigation. And then the Gantt component actually got it for the first time with this release. So we released the Gantt component with R3 2020, and we managed to add in the keyboard navigation alongside with the editing into this release as well. So yeah, it's a nice feature to highlight for sure.
Yeah, and speaking of the Gantt, I think I'll give 2 last shout outs here before we turn it over to the Xamarin people. The Gantt got a pretty massive update that you can now, it's basically, the Gantt is interactable. I'm failing, right? You can now interact with the Gantt.
There you go.
It's totally redo it, because I mean, in the initial version of the Gantt, it's basically just a view-only mode. It got some data, it showed it. You could do things like expand and collapse and filter and such, but now you can totally just completely add new tasks. You can edit tasks. You can like reassign relationships, assuming you know how Gantt work, which I still don't have a total good grasp on. I'm probably like creating some sort of dependency mess here, but you can do that. You can delete tasks. There's a lot going on here. So this is a pretty big update. So if you've considered using the Gantt before, I think this makes it a lot more of a viable thing that you might want to look into. So I'll give that shout out. And then the very last shout out, the scheduler got this ability to work with custom forms and form editors. And basically, and I think I like this, the demo in here a little bit nicer, so I'll scroll down to this. But basically, you now have total control over editing the forms that you can use within the scheduler. And the scheduler is one of my favorite components because I love how almost everything you see here has some sort of extension point, whether it's for the items, the open slots, tasks, the editor. And I think it bridges this nice mix, at least to me, of a component that's really powerful, but it has all of these little points here or there that you can extend into. And I also think React is really well suited for this because you can just write a quick, lightweight component to do this sort of thing as well. So I'll just give my final shout out to the scheduler and this entire customization section, but the form stuff is what's new for this release.
Yeah, it's a great feature to add. Most of our components have that, right? The ability to work with a custom render or something like that, or at least some way of customizing. So the more we add in, and the scheduler is a very popular component to customize and make your own. So super excited to see that in there.
So I think, man, we're crushed it on time. We're like right at the top of the hour. The scheduler also loves you. We're not supposed to have favorite components, but I like the scheduler quite a bit. Yvonne, I think you're on mute. I think you were trying to get excited about the scheduler also.
I was going to say good timing.
Yeah.
And also the fact that your scheduler love is mutual. I think I'm a fan of requited love. So congrats, TJ. I think this is a very good thing for all of us here.
Yeah.
But before you go, we have a winner and you have to choose it. So between the three of you, I need you to think of your favorite number between 1 and 20 and decide on 1. And this is going to be our winner. And in the meantime, I'll act as a drummer, although I have absolutely zero musical sense. So drum roll.
Carl, go.
Sorry, I missed that because I was typing into chat.
Oh,
I heard TJ, and now that was my moment.
We have the drum roll going for you.
I know. I'm sorry. I really got distracted by chat.
Okay, we're doing this again because you're going to do it right.
I'm going to do it right. I promise. I'm paying attention. I heard TJ take it over, and then my brain was like, all right, help out with the chat. And then there went my brain.
Okay, you're picking a number between 1 and 20, but you're going to wait for the drum roll, right?
Okay.
I'm
going to do my own drum roll as well.
Yeah. We got to build momentum to this.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so here we go.
13.
So number 13 is Nara. I can't read that name, but Nara, congratulations, and we're going to email you. You're getting a $50 gift card to Amazon, and thank you for tuning in. And just before I welcome the other people, or maybe you can welcome them, I'm just going to share quickly what's left of the stream today, if I manage to share anything at all. I can't make sense of my computer. I'm really sorry. There it is. So we're almost through. We're almost halfway through. Should we bring on the rest of the crew? I'm gonna
let's
head
do
off.
it.
Let's
Thanks,
do some
Carlos.
coding.
Thanks, Stefan. I really appreciate it. Thanks everybody for joining us.
Thank you, guys.
Everybody.
All right, we're bringing in Sam. Why don't we welcome you in, and then Sam, do you want to help me add everybody?
Yeah, I'll pull folks in. But oh my God, I'm live on the internet.
You're
I've been off for like a couple of hours since yesterday. Yeah.
All right, Sam. I'm gonna take off. I'm gonna give you control of the stream. So best of luck.
Right.
Have a good one.
Sounds good. Thank you.